So we're going to discuss our fifth primitive affine transform today, which is loop reversal. So let's look at this example. For I equals 0 to n, y n minus I equals zi. So notice that y is being traversed in the reverse order because the coefficient of I is -1, whereas z is being traversed in the forward order, just like all the other examples. And now we have for j equals 0 to n, xj equals yj. So both x and y in this case are being traversed in the forward order. Now once again, as we have been using in our examples, there is a read after write dependency between elements axes of y with axes to yn minus I and axes to yj. And if I was to draw a pictorial representation, the crosses represent the instances of S1 and the circles represent the instances of S2. Then the first instance of S1 is going to access yn, and that is what is going to be accessed by the last instance of S2, because the last instance of S2 is going to access yn. And so there is a read after write dependency from the first instance of S1 to the last instance of S2. Similarly, there is a read after write dependency from second instance of S1 to the n-1th instance of S2, and so on. And so this is what our dependency graph looks like. And the question is, what would be the resulting space partitioning constraints? What would be the resulting transformation of the program for synchronization-free parallelism, and also locality as a result? And so, and whatever is the result is actually going to form our fifth primitive affine transform, which is loop reversal. Okay, so my first step is going to be to represent this program in the polyhedral representation. There are two statements, S1 and S2. The iteration space of S1 is from 0 to n, and that's for I. And then the iteration space for S2 is also 0 to n. Both are single dimensional iteration spaces. Now I'm going to create my space partitioning constraints. What are my space partitioning constraints? Whenever there is a dependence, a data dependence from S1 to S2, then they should have those instances which have a data dependence must be mapped to the same processor ID. And so this basically translates to saying that whenever n minus I equals j, because that's when there will be a data dependence between an instance of S1 and an instance of S2. So whenever n minus 1 equals j, this is just the lowering of fi plus small f equals capital F prime small I prime plus small f prime. Then this should be then pi equals pj. In other words, the iteration I and iteration j should map to the same processor. And so based on these space partitioning constraints, the solution that I'll get, the maximum rank solution that I'll get is p equals n minus I and p equals j. So for the ith iteration of S1, it is mapped to the n minus ith processor in the processor space. For example, the 0th iteration of S1 is going to get mapped to the nth processor. And on the other hand, for S2 it is p equals j, which means the nth iteration of S2 is going to get mapped to the nth processor. So 0th iteration of S1 and the nth iteration of S2 are going to get mapped to the same processor, which is processor ID n. And that's exactly what our space partitioning constraints require. And so on for other processor IDs as well. And now the next job is to generate the code for this particular maximum rank solution. The naive code generation strategy is to have an outer loop on the processor space. So for p equals 0 to n, notice that the lower bound is 0 because both S1 and S2 mappings, given that i's maximum value is capital N, so the p's minimum value will be a capital N minus capital N, that's 0. And p equals j is just because j's minimum value is 0, so p's minimum value will be 0. So the lower bound is 0. Similarly, you can check for yourself that the upper bound for p is going to be capital N. So the outer loop is just for p equals 0 to n, p plus plus, and then I just paste the original program as it is, except that I predicate the statements S1 and S2 with their respective mapping functions, the solutions, because we only want those iterations to execute on the current processor ID which are mapped to that particular processor ID. So I'm going to say if p equals n minus I, yi n minus I equals zi, if p equals j, xj equals yj. And now I'm going to tighten my loop bounds or eliminate empty iterations. It is very clear that this inner loop on I is only going to have one iteration which is meaningful. All the other iterations are going to be empty for this inner loop on I. Similarly, for the inner loop on J, only one iteration is going to be non-empty. All other iterations are going to be empty. Which is the iteration of the ith loop on I, which is non-empty? It is the iteration where I equals n minus p, right? Because that's the only iteration for which this predicate is going to evaluate to true. Similarly, the iteration for which this is going to be non-empty for J's loop is when J equals p. And so I can basically simplify the loop and in fact remove the inner loops and just replace I with n minus p, and so that gives me n minus I becomes n minus p, which becomes just p, right? N minus parentheses n minus p, that just becomes p, and I here is replaced by n minus p, so this becomes n minus p, and that's S1. And similarly for S2, it becomes xp equals yp because j is equal to p, and so I get xp equals yp, and this is my new transform program. Because we basically respected space partitioning constraints while finding our mapping function, you can be assured that this new program, transform program, is equivalent to the original program. And if I was to draw the same thing pictorially, our original loop data dependencies look something like the following. There were edges from the first iteration of S1 to the last iteration of S2, and the last iteration of S1 to the first iteration of S2. But now I have been able to transform the loop while respecting data dependencies such that the data dependencies are actually have a very small reuse distance. The data dependent iterations actually occur in the same iteration of the outer loop P. Essentially what I have been able to do is just rearrange S1 iterations so that so that these edges become the shortest possible. And this has been the common theme in all our primitive affine transform examples that we have been looking so far, which have involved the use of space partitioning constraints.